So a while back, I did a video called Types of Rock Music, and then I attempted to explain the types of rock music in that video. If you haven't watched it, I'm going to leave it at the end screen. And in the comment section, someone asked me, Eddie Grimm, where do you classify Of Monsters and Men? Of Monsters and Men is the band that is in the thumbnail right now, the lead singer. The lead singer of Monsters and Men is down in the thumbnail right now. So I thought today we could talk about indie rock music. This is a genre that I have not talked about on my channel for never. I have never talked about this genre. And there are people who think that indie rock music is rock music from Indians. Yeah, I'm like, no, indie rock music is not rock music from Indians. Indie refers to alternative rock bands. Alternative rock is like Kings of Leon, Three Doors Down, even Foo Fighters. Don't worry that I'm wearing Metallica in a video about indie rock. But Foo Fighters, I did a whole video about alternative rock, which I'll also leave at the end screen in case you haven't seen it. Now, indie is about alternative rock bands that are either small as in they're not so famous, they haven't reached very huge commercial success. 2, they are not signed to a record label, or at least when they started they were not signed to a record label. Or 3, they're just low budget bands. They don't have a lot to work with like these mainstream bands like Akina 30 Seconds to Mars have. Independent. So today I'm going to be discussing like the most popular indie rock bands. These are the indie rock bands that I grew up listening to, especially from 2010 until right now. Alright, there are about 30 of them, and number 1 is, as I said, Of Monsters and Men. Of Monsters and Men is classified as indie rock and also I think indie pop. So most of these bands are either indie rock or indie pop, and then you might also find them classified as alternative rock. Some of them. Next band is Foster the People, one of my most fun, my favorite indie rock band, and also a favorite for many people. Next one is Florence and the Machine, of course, Florence Welch and Florence and the Machine. Florence and the Machine is also classified as art rock. Yeah, indie rock bands also tend to be in other genres, but Florence and the Machine is also indie. Next up we have the Black Keys. I believe the Black Keys is a duo, and they are very relevant until right now. Next up is a band called the Temper Trap. I believe Temper Trap is indie, but if I'm wrong, please comment below. And also, if you hear your favorite rock band, please comment below. The Temper Trap are known for this very huge song called Sweet Disposition. It's a really good song. Next up is the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Not very familiar with this band, but I've heard 1 or 2 of their songs. They are considered indie. Next band is M83. Like, some of these bands you would not even know because, as I said, they haven't reached very huge commercial success. Next up would have to be Snow Patrol. Snow Patrol is a very popular indie rock band, also sometimes classified as alternative rock. The lead singer is called Gary Lightbody, and he's actually pretty popular. Next up would have to be Arcade Fire. Arcade Fire, I believe, is from Canada, and I think one of the reasons why they became very famous is because one of their songs is in the Hunger Games. I'll write which song, I'll write the name of the song on the screen. I can't remember right now. And that made the band very popular. Next up is a band called Death Cab for Cutie. They have a really popular song called I Will Follow You Into the Dark. It's one of the most popular songs on radio, and that's the song that has propelled them into a bit of popularity. Next up is a band called Blur. You probably know them for their song called Song 2, and it's that song that goes like woohoo! When I feel heavy metal, yeah, you know that song. Yeah, Blur is also considered as indie and also as alternative rock. Next up is one of the most popular indie rock bands ever, and that has to be Arctic Monkeys. If you're a fan of Arctic Monkeys, please comment below. They have a really huge song called Do I Wanna Know, which has really popularized them. Next up is Vance Joy. Vance Joy is known for their song called Riptide. Next up is Kasabian. I personally discovered Kasabian because I think I had one of their songs in FIFA, and then also they have this song called Fire, which is, I think, a song for EPL. It's heavily used in football as a theme song or something. Next up has to be FOALS. FOALS is considered as indie rock, indie pop. They have a song called In Degrees. So if you've never heard of FOALS, go look for a song called In Degrees by FOALS. I love FOALS very much. Next up, there's a band called MGMT. They are very popularly known for their song Kids, and the music video for Kids is a bit, let me say, disturbing. But MGMT EMT is also considered as indie. Next up would have to be Kaiser Chiefs. I believe Kaiser Chiefs considered as indie and also as alternative rock. Next up would have to be Two Door Cinema Club. Do you even know Two Door Cinema Club? Please comment below. I think I know a song of theirs called I Can Talk. Yeah, go look for that song. Two Door Cinema Club, I Can Talk. This is the song that made me know about Two Door Cinema Club. They are indie, they're not very popular. Next up would have to be the Lumineers. Lumineers is considered, I think, as indie folk. So there's like variations of indie as well. There's indie pop, there's indie rock, there's indie folk. So I believe Lumineers is indie folk. Next up is a band called Cordaline. I believe Cordaline is indie, but if I'm wrong, please comment below. I researched some of these, and some of these I've always listened to them and always known that they are indie artists or indie rock artists, mainly indie rock artists. Next up would have to be AWOLNATION. You probably know them for their song Sail. It has those heavy bass beats, and that's one of their biggest songs. Sail is one of the biggest hits that propelled them into a bit of popularity. Next up, the White Stripes. The White Stripes. I always remember Black Keys and White Stripes. Someone once cracked a joke saying White Stripes and Black Keys, if they were to do a collabo, they'd call it the piano, yeah, because of Black Keys. Anyway, yeah, so the White Stripes, I believe they broke up, but a popular indie rock band. Next up would have to be The Killers. The Killers, I believe, is the most popular indie rock band. You cannot talk about indie rock without talking about Killers in the same statement. So The Killers. Next up would have to be Strambellas. I believe Strambellas is Canadian, and they're the ones who did that song called I Got Guns in My Hand and I Don't Know. In a hand and I don't know. Pretty sure you know that song. It was very popular on the radio, so I believe Strambellas is also indie. Next up would have to be Mumford and Sons. Mumford and Sons is not strictly indie. Mumford and Sons is also known as folk rock. So the difference between indie and folk is that indie tends to have alternative rock elements, like they could even use distortion, like Kings of Leon. I like using Kings of Leon because they have a very good alternative rock sound. Mumford and Sons and Kings of Leon don't sound the same. Folk uses instruments that are, let's say, traditional, things like accordion, harmonica, banjo, things like that. So Mumford and Sons has been considered as indie and also mainly as folk. Mainly more folk, but also a bit of indie because they are not that famous. Next up has to be Echosmith. Echosmith is not necessarily indie. They are considered more of pop rock, but also because of them not being so famous, they also considered as indie pop. Next up has to be The Neighborhood. You probably know them for their song Sweater Weather. And then there was a time I used to consider, or we used to consider in the rock community, we used to consider Imagine Dragons as indie, but I think an indie band, if they ever hit commercial success, they stop being indie. Once they hit like a very huge level of commercial success, they stop being indie. So right now, Imagine Dragons is more pop and pop rock, not really indie. So to anyone who would have said Imagine Dragons is indie, I hope I have mentioned that. And with that, that is my total. At least I believe I've mentioned 30 artists of indie, or I think I've mentioned 27. The last 3 are artists that I have never listened to, but people keep telling me they are indie and also considered as indie rock, and they include Imogen Heap. I've never listened to Imogen Heap, but people keep telling me that Imogen Heap is classified as indie rock. Next up is an artist called Bon Iver, also classified as indie. I have never listened to them, but I listen to what fans tell me, so they tell me about Bon Iver. And then lastly, Tame Impala, also considered as indie. I'm not sure. Do you know any of these 3 artists? Imogen Heap, Bon Iver, Tame Impala. If you do, please comment below and tell me if you've ever listened to their music and if they're classified as indie. Alright, that is my list of indie rock bands, hopefully to help you know what indie is all about and to help you gain an understanding of what indie is all about. If you enjoyed this, make sure to give this a like. If it gave you a bit of information, make sure to subscribe. I said that I talked about alternative rock bands, so if you want to understand which bands are alternative, which ones are indie, click on this link right here and also leave it at the end screen. Alternative rock bands are way more famous. Bands like Lifehouse, Three Doors Down, Foo Fighters, Congos, Kaleo. Those bands are a bit way more famous than those I just mentioned, or they're considered to be a bit more famous, especially in terms of radio popularity. All right, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the video. You take care and God bless.